when we think about and talk about diversity as sort of a flavor of the day, I say to them, no, all we're talking about is you have a whole group of people who have a whole bunch of knowledge and information. And if you create the right kind of culture where they feel like they've been treated fairly and they feel like they matter, they'll tell you things that you don't know. And the things you don't know can ultimately change the conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
You know?
No,
so that's how I am with it. I'm like, all of us know what it's like to feel excluded.
Creating truly inclusive workplaces isn't about checking a box. It's about shifting mindsets, challenging norms, and embedding equity in every decision. Yet many organisations struggle with moving from good intentions to real lasting change. The key question is, how do we turn DEI from a set of policies into a way of leading and working that benefits everyone? Today's guest, Rosalyn Taylor O'Neal, has spent 5 decades helping organisations build workplaces where people don't just show up, they belong. A renowned DEI strategist, speaker, and author of 7 Keys to Success, Nothing's Changed but Everything's Different, Rosalyn brings a fresh, no-nonsense perspective on how leaders can create real accountability in DEI efforts, not just lip service. We'll dive into the power of curiosity, empathy, and courageous leadership to drive meaningful change. This conversation truly resonated with me, not just as a DEI advocate, but as a mother who wants to see real change in the workplace. Rosalyn's insights are practical, deeply thought-provoking, and full of wisdom earned from years of her experience. If you've ever wondered how to move beyond performative DEI initiatives and create real impact, this episode is for you. Before we dive in, a quick favour. If you love these conversations and want to help spread meaningful discussions like this one, hit that subscribe button and share this episode with a friend or colleague. Your support makes a huge difference in amplifying these important voices. Now, without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with the incredible Rosalyn Taylor O'Neal. Enjoy. Hi, Rosalyn.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining me here at the All Inclusive podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I am so excited.
Yes, so let's start off. Tell our listeners a little bit more about you and what does DEI mean to you?
Yeah. So, okay, first of all, my name is Rosalyn Taylor O'Neal. I use she, her, hers pronouns. For those of you who cannot see me, I am in the summertime, I'm a fairly dark-skinned Black woman. In the wintertime, I'm a fairly light-skinned Black woman with very, very, very short blonde hair, which since COVID, I both cut and color myself. So I have to start with something around this notion of what does DEI mean to me? And that is, I separate those 3 letters into the words that are behind them. So we talk about DEI as if it's a noun, a thing. I tell people DEI is not a Twinkie. You can't leave it someplace. You can't throw it away. You can't buy it. So diversity and equity and inclusion and belonging and all the work that we're doing now means a lot to me. It means that I have spent the last 5 decades helping organizations to figure out how do they make a place where people enjoy coming to work as much as you can, because nobody really wants to come to work. But since we have to come to work, how do we have an organization? And that's where DEI, diversity, bringing in the different voices and equity, making sure that it's fair, and inclusion, a place where I feel like, yeah, I'm a part of it, can happen. And so that's really what it means to me. It means the daily result of my years in this work.
Oh, great. And I know your book challenges readers to ask the right questions and also to listen with an open heart. In your most recent book titled 7 Keys to Success, Nothing's Changed but Everything's Different, What inspired you to write it?
Yeah. When I wrote the first book, which is Unlocking the Passion for Diversity, I actually thought that two things. One is I thought we got to give organizations some steps, some stages. And I thought that the thing that would make this work best was passion. Um, I have a passion for this, and I met people who seem to have a passion for it. And passion is the things that make you do it when you don't feel like it, the things that help you to feel happy about what you're doing. 20 plus years later, 2005 to 2000, almost 20 years later, I started thinking about what's changed. And in some ways, nothing's changed. We still have all the isms, sexism, racism, ageism, and all. We still live in segregated enclaves. Church is the most segregated day of the week. We still live in segregated neighborhoods and segregated educational institutions. What's changed is when I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, the South, the segregated South, there were Black people and white people. By the way, there were no Black people with a British accent. There were no Black people with an accent at all, other than a Southern accent. There were white people with a Southern accent and Black people with a Southern accent. And so what's changed now is the massive ways in which we have diversity and what that's created around how do you create inclusion. So for me, this book was the follow-on that said, okay, we started at passion. Now we're looking at things like curiosity. I remember the first time I heard a Black-skinned person with a British accent, I thought, well, that's odd. Curiosity is, why would I think that's odd? Okay, why would I think that only people this skin color can live in the US? And then this notion of how do we develop an empathy for one another? How do we hear one another's stories? And the last piece, which I talk a lot about, is this notion of courage. So that's how it sort of came about. Was I moved from just passion to really looking at what does the way the world has changed, how does that influence? What does that mean when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI?
And I think in your book, from reading it, I felt like there was you do have quite a unique perspective on how we can actually make that change happen, through some of the stories that you tell within it, the tools that you have, and actually the exercises as well. So could you share with our listeners some practical strategies that can be used in order to make the change that we all want to see?
First of all work starts with me. If people want to have something where they can go in a room and come out not racist, not sexist, able to see and hear all sorts of things, and it doesn't work that way. So what I say is, first and foremost, I have to ask myself, what do I know about me that influences how I see other people? The book was really about leaders who have demonstrated how they get information about themselves. A lot of that comes from the work that we did together, the leaders and I, and the work that they then did with their groups, teams, organizations, to go, first of all, be curious, to say to folks, what's your experience? How did you get here? What in your background brought you here? I tell people, my parents were, I was raised by socially conscious people. My mother was a social worker, and she taught special education at one point in time. My father was a police officer. My brother was a firefighter. So I come from this family of people who say, this is what we do. So I say to leaders, first of all, talk about who you are, and then begin to look at who others are, and then begin to look at what does that say about our organization? Where do we let people in and where do we keep them out? The actionable item, so I say, understand that people are following what you do. they are looking at you. New employees look at long tenured employees to figure out what are the rules. I have an analogy that I use called spitting on the floor. And I was doing some work.
That sounds very interesting. I'm so
I know.
curious.
I was doing some work with an organization once, and I was talking to the CEO, and we were just talking about how you lead. And I said to him, you know, you make it important for leaders to know that this is important to you and the organization for its survival and their survival. And he said, yeah, I think that's good. So we're going to go into this room, and I want you to just really help my leaders to know what to do. So I said to him, okay. So we go in the room, and I said to them, here's the question I have. Why is it that I've never seen, and I've done this work now in, at that point, probably 30 countries. I've done it in 50 countries up to this point, but I've been about 30 countries. And I said, and why is it I've never been in a meeting room in any country and noticed that somebody just in the middle of a conversation turned and spit on the floor? Nobody spits on the floor. It's not that people don't spit when they're outside running. It's not that they just don't do it in here. And I said, why don't people spit on the floor? Now, part of it is, if you do it, everybody around you is going to go, ooh. The most important thing is leaders don't do it. So I said to them, if your CEO, and I turned to him, I said, if he in the next meeting, in the middle of a presentation about the numbers and all, just suddenly said, and we've got, and spit on the floor, within 6 weeks, people would be spitting on the floor. So when people say to me, what do we do? I say, remember that people do what you do. As leaders, they do what you do as colleagues and peers. You got to understand why diversity of thought and view and color and gender and identity is important to your outcome. So if you're consumer products, the consumer is changing. If you are a B2B, the folks who are opening businesses are different than they used to be. So you gotta begin to say to ourselves, what is it that I need to know? Who do I need to know? And how do we gather them in and gather the information?
Right. And I think it's important as well that because I think the generations that are coming into the workforce now I feel are clear in terms of who they are, what their viewpoint on things are, and they're not afraid to ask a question.
Not
so
at
when
all.
they come in and the processes and the policy and the culture's set, they're not afraid to be like, oh, okay, why is it that we do it that way? And
Yes.
And it's so important at that point as a leader that you not only you kind of shut them down and say, oh, well, no, we do it this way because of this. It's oh, well, actually, that's a good question. We haven't thought of that. Like,
yes,
do you know? Because that's the whole point. That's the whole reason why you hire them, is because you want more people to come with that openness, that different perspective on things.
Yes, and if I am curious, and I say, you know, I don't know why we do it this way. When I got here, we did it this way. But tell me, what's that mean? How, help me think about it differently. You get people who say, yes, I will help you. I will do the things you need me to do.
Those are some really great insights there. So moving a little bit on to inequities, they're present in the workplaces still today, unfortunately. And we are trying to break those barriers. What are some common forms of inequity that you have actually observed in your experience, and how can we address those?
So first, it's important to think about inequities as things that benefit one group and therefore disadvantage another group. It's not that there are things that are just not advantageous to one group, but they in fact are an advantage to another group. So policies and practices that reinforce the knowledge that you might get if you grew up upper middle class and went to certain schools, the practices that you have. It might be as simple as how you behave at a company dinner based on where you grew up and the culture and how you ate food and what you talked about. It disadvantages one group at the advantage of another one. So I tell leaders to look at inequities, you have to first start to look at what privileges do the majority, whatever that is, whether that is white people in the US or whether that is tribal in parts of Africa, what advantages do we give people that disadvantage someone else? So if all of our presentations have a PowerPoint, that actually is an advantage to people who can see and who speak whatever the language is in the presentation. And it disadvantages others. So inequities are those things where we have to look at what gives somebody. I used to run track, and you have a 400-meter race, and there are people who are standing on the 50-meter line, and they don't realize that they're on the 50-meter line. They're just there for the start. They don't realize the people behind them. The people at the starting realize that there are people at the 50-meter line, and they can't do anything about it. What the people at the starting line don't realize is there are people who are locked out of the arena. They can't even get into the starting line. And so that's what you have to look at in organizations. What are those things? And they are things like, we have meetings that run to 5:30, 6 p.m. Well, if you have a 5-year-old and you don't have help at home, whether that's a parent or a nanny or whatever, and you have to pick that child up, most daycares close at 6. And then they start to charge you a lot of money per minute after that. Mm-hmm. And your child is standing there, everybody else has left, and they're just there. And the daycare people are not happy because they have children they have to go pick up. So as leaders, we don't think about the fact that if I don't have children, being able to meet until 6 is an advantage because I can get engaged, and it disadvantages people who can't. That's what we have to look at, is all the ways that our usual stuff. What time do we eat lunch? What's available? If I'm not diabetic, what's available at lunch that we bring in doesn't matter. But if I have digestive issues or diabetes or something where what I eat is important, it matters. Now you can say, well, Rosalyn, you could bring your own stuff. And I say, that's where inclusion doesn't happen. Because now I've got my little thing here and everybody else is having a great time. Oh my God, this is the most beautiful food on the planet. And I'm here and people are like, oh, I wish you could have this. And I think that's what inequity is. It's not realizing that I wish you could have this is not the answer. The answer is, how do we make this inclusive? How do we make it so that you don't have an unfair advantage? And we have lots of unfair advantages. I was doing a speech for an organization, and I said to them, if you used a wheelchair for your mobility, how do you get into this building? And this is a new building with a ramp, okay? It's got a ramp that goes up to a door that you have to then pull open this way and get in. That's heavy. The interesting thing is, and this is a social services organization in Washington, D.C., and they said, oh, I never thought about it. That's how inequity happens. I'm able-bodied. I can go up to the door. I have the use of both my arms. I can see the door. I don't think about the fact that I'm now advantaged because I can get to the meeting on time, whereas someone else is disadvantaged.
Yeah, right. I feel it takes that extra step, right, to widen your mind, your eyesight.
Yes.
It's that peripheral vision. That's what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get everybody in that state where it's no longer tunnel vision. Well, I can do it this way. It's fine for me,
Right.
or it's fine for the majority in this room. It's
Right.
think about those that
Yeah.
aren't there, or those that may not also be on your side. So that minority, it's kind
Right.
of asking those additional questions, and finding solutions. So
Yes.
no, I totally agree. I think that's great. This episode of All Inclusive is brought to you by Paradigm, the platform that helps companies build innovative, high performance workplaces for everyone. Anti-diversity activism is currently surging in the mainstream, challenging corporate DEI programs. But the data tells a different story. Many companies remain committed to their efforts, finding ways to evolve and embed inclusion deeper into their business practices. That's why forward-thinking leaders partner with Paradigm. Their latest report, The State of Culture and Inclusion, reveals how companies are navigating the current climate and driving real progress in 2025. Click the link in the description below to download your free report today. You also discuss in the book the role of leadership, and how the importance of leaders when it comes to driving DEI efforts. Can you share a little bit more on how can we as leaders not just pay lip service when it comes to talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we can actually take action?
Yeah. So the question that I would always ask to answer this question is, I ask leaders all the time, why do you care about this? And they say, well, and I said, and by the way, don't give me the drivel, well, we have a different, I said, don't do that. Don't do that. Nobody cares about that. I want to know why you, Joe, Mary, Samuel, Laverne, I want to know why you care about this. And if I can get leaders to begin to talk about, one gentleman said to me, I asked this in a group, I said, I want everybody to create your personal business case for diversity, inclusion, and equity, your personal one. And a guy said, my grandson has autism. And I've watched him be treated badly. And I said to him, that's what empathy is. It is saying, I may not know what's exactly true for you, but I know what it looks like and feels like when someone you love, someone who's important to you, is being treated badly. So leaders are the answer to whatever the question is. I believe if you can get them to, as humans, start at an experience that they've had. One guy said, I was taking my wife to the OBGYN. She was pregnant. And at one point I needed to drop her off there and pick her up. So he said, I take her, I walk in the room. He said, and like 10 pairs of eyes turn and look at me. And he said, they looked at me in a way that made me think, I should leave now. I'm not comfortable. It was a group of women who were like, why is this guy? And I said to him, that's what I want you to remember, so that when that millennial, Gen Z, is sitting at the table, I want you to remember what it's like when people make up stories about you. The other thing is I say to leaders is, you make deep footprints in the sand, deep footprints in the sand, and that's what people follow. So I always say to them, do you care about quality? Especially if they have a product. Do you care about, so if I'm talking to the leaders at Boeing, I say to them, do you care anything about quality or safety? I'm just asking,
Yeah.
like today. And they're like, well, yeah. I say to them, so Is it something that's just a passing fad, fancy, it'll go away? The answer is no. And I say to them, if you think that quality and safety have nothing to do with the human beings who work in your organization, you're making a huge mistake, because quality and safety and ethics are all the outcomes of the people in your organization. Because sometimes the people in the organization say, we have a problem. And they work for somebody who says, I don't want to hear it. And then you end up with a quality issue or a safety issue. So when we think about and talk about diversity as sort of a flavor of the day, I say to them, no, all we're talking about is you have a whole group of people who have a whole bunch of knowledge and information. And if you create the right kind of culture where they feel like they've been treated fairly and they feel like they matter, they'll tell you things that you don't know. And the things you don't know can ultimately change the conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
No,
definitely.
So that's how I am with it. I'm like, all of us know what it's like to feel excluded.
Yeah, I mean, I totally can resonate with like that personal business case for doing this work, because for me, like, I started the podcast because I had the courage to say to myself, like, I want to pursue something that matters to me. And what matters to me is that when my daughter goes into the workplace, she doesn't have to experience any of the things that I had to experience, that I can stop that mindset, that which no bad credit to my mum, like that's all that she was taught, was that you've got to keep your head down, work really hard. That's yes, right. You might encounter some ignorant people, some people that will make you feel that you're less than, but don't worry, you just work 10 times harder and you'll reap the benefits. And I don't want her to have that mindset of that that's okay, like that's normal, just right. Because you look a different way and you come from right. a different background. Right. So yeah, I totally get that.
And I will say to folks, anytime you can get a leader to exactly that point. The first leader I ever did work for, who I just thought was one of the best in the world, was a gentleman by the name of Ian Rowland, who was CEO of Lincoln National Life Insurance Company, the first place that I worked in. And Ian said to me, I have 2 daughters. And just like you, and this is 1974. And he said, I don't want them to grow up and have people treat them differently because of how they look, because of their gender. And he said, I want to do whatever I can to make sure that they don't have that. That's really what it is. And the more leaders we can get to that place, the easier this work becomes.
Definitely. So I want to just move on, just before you leave us. I want to talk a bit about accountability, because it is often mentioned when we talk about DEI, is that accountability piece. So how can organizations create these cultures of accountability?
The exact same way they create the culture of accountability around ethics. Nobody ever says, well, how do we make it hold people accountable to be ethical? I say, you know how to do that. You don't even ask the question, okay? Right. Nobody comes in and says, I'm thinking about being unethical today. Does anybody mind? It's in the fabric. It's in the organization. Quality, like DEI, is a part of the fabric. And when it's missing, it's costly. So when people talk to me about accountability, we talk about it like, if we don't, we like there's a possibility that people will not be held accountable for being human. Okay, it's like they will. Nobody asks you, well, honesty is one of those things, but I'm not sure if we want to hold people accountable for honesty. So I've decided I'm going to be dishonest today, and I just thought I'd let you know. Okay, I'm going to steal some stuff. And I'm going to do some things that might get us in trouble with the SEC or might get us in trouble with the, FCC. So don't worry about it. Never happens. Leaders are like, oh no, And that's how they have to become around this notion of how we treat people, how we include people.
Mm.
Because if you treat me badly, and you have on the wall these statements, we value all of our people. I say, if on the wall it says we value our people, but in my daily interactions with you, it's clear you do not value me, I'm going to leave. And I'm going to take as many of you good people as I can with me. And so it's the same accountability as we have for everything else. We just don't say to people, you don't have to be ethical. You don't have to pay attention to quality. We don't care if you don't care about quality. It's the same as we hold people accountable for profitability. We hold them accountable for innovation. We just do. And we don't let them opt out. If we're a company where innovation,
that's what I think. I think it's like the language that we're using when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion. It's not like this is like a standalone thing. If any programs, initiatives, anything that you say around this should be weaved into the fabric of how your organization operates, because it then goes back to the piece of accountability. Well, that's just a given. Like we expect you to perform, do your day-to-day duties. The way that we want our teams to work is that everyone has a voice, that everyone is able to speak. So if we can see that you as a leader are not allowing people to do that, then naturally
you need to go work.
The outcome will be
someplace else.
You need to work somewhere else.
Yes. We say to people, if you can't lead in this fashion, you need to go work someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
And great leaders, especially great senior leaders, executives, go there. They say, either we're all going, this is important. This is as important to us as anything that we do. Because if we lose talent, we can't win. We can't.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, Rosalyn, thank you so much for all of the great insights that you shared today. It's been absolutely amazing. Before you leave us, though, I'm going to ask you one last question.
Okay.
And it's, can you give us just one piece of advice for the DEI leaders listening in today to help them along their journey?
Yes. Say to every one of the leaders who is looking to you for help, say to them, we all need to get a coach. We need to get somebody who holds us accountable, who knows more than we know. That as DEI leaders, as I pass the torch, I'm at an age where I say, I'm passing the torch to the next level. And I say, you and I need to get a coach. And you need to say to every one of your leaders, we need coaches. We need people who can keep us and hold us accountable. People who we trust, so that inside the room, we can tell them what's really true and they can help us, as different from, So get a coach. Know that there are people who know more than you know. Find them, and find people who make you slightly uncomfortable. Because they're like, no, you're not that special. And yes, I can help you. And that's what I tell people. Yeah. And by the way, thank you for this platform. I am so excited to be here with you and to have seen the other podcasts that you've done. Some great stuff.
Oh, no, no, definitely, Rosalyn. I mean, I appreciate you so much for your time, your wisdom. The work you have done over the years has been absolutely incredible and so impactful, and you continue to do great work as well. So, no, thank you. And I can't wait to see what more work you do. I want us to stay connected. For our listeners out there, if they want to stay connected to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can just log into my website, which is Rosalyn Taylor O'Neal. .com, and or they can look on your page here, and I'm sure there's a link to it, but it's Rosalyn Taylor O'Neal .com. And I love this work and I love talking to people about it. So anybody who needs to talk, if we just want to share ideas, look me up. I'm on LinkedIn as Rosalyn Taylor O'Neal. I'm on Facebook. And I'm probably in some other places.
No worries. So I'm going to have links down below for all of those that you've mentioned. And also, most importantly, I shall put a link down below for your amazing book, 7 Keys to Success. Nothing's changed, but everything's different. Once again, Rosalyn, thank you so much for joining me, and I wish you all the luck in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. And I wish you all the same, and we will stay in touch.